You're standing in a checkout line, card already tapped, watching $38 sit on the screen. 3 days until payday. Here's what nobody tells you. The richest people in this country mostly aren't employees. The large majority are business owners, investors, or people who own a skill no one else has. But the thing that actually separates them isn't the income. It's the management. The same structure, run on purpose. Every single month. You make 6 figures. And you've never run yours through anything but instinct. That's the first thing you had to face: the 6-figure broke trap. You leave the store without buying anything. The $38 does the deciding for you, and you drive home in the SUV you leased 10 months ago. Payments you keep calling fine. The payment has always been fine right up until the moment it isn't. Your phone buzzes at a red light. It's a friend from the office, sending a photo of her new designer bag, the one that runs close to $10,000. Finally treated myself, the caption says. You type back a heart. You don't tell her you haven't checked your card balance in over a week, because you already know roughly what it says. And roughly is worse than exactly, because roughly means you've stopped wanting the real number. At home, you take off the watch you put on a card back in spring and set it next to the mail you haven't opened. You make more money than almost anyone you grew up with. Your parents ask how work is going, and you say great, and mean it. That's the strange part. Work is great. The number on your offer letter was real. Somewhere between that number and this apartment, most of it just evaporated, and you've never been able to point to exactly where. Here's what would shock the version of you from 5 years ago, the one who thought 6 figures meant the stress just stopped. It doesn't. Not automatically. Nearly half of people earning over $100,000 a year live the same paycheck-to-paycheck rhythm you do. Same tight chest at checkout. Same mental math before the card taps. High income was supposed to be the finish line. For a lot of people in nice watches and leased cars, it's just a bigger treadmill. You used to think the problem was that you didn't earn enough. Now you suspect the problem was never the paycheck. It's what happens to that number in the 48 hours after it lands. How much of it quietly reroutes toward things that make you look like you're winning, instead of things that would actually mean you are. You open your banking app not because the number will have changed, but because tonight some part of you needs to actually look. $38. And underneath the shame, a different question starts to surface. Not how do I make more, but where is it actually going? 2 days later, something happens that won't let you keep ignoring it. You're at the register, and the reader rejects your card. Twice, the cashier waits. The person behind you shifts their weight. You tap a second card, it goes through, and you walk out with a feeling in your stomach that has nothing to do with hunger. You call an old college friend that night, the one person you can say this to without performing. My card got declined, you tell her, like it's funny. She doesn't laugh. She asks the question you've been dodging for a week. How much do you actually owe on it? You open the app. Not a glance this time. You sit on the edge of your bed and read it. $6,400. And right next to it, the interest rate you've scrolled past 100 times, 22%. You open the calculator and do the math you've spent 2 years avoiding. Minimum payment on that balance, at that rate, if you never charge another dollar. It takes you close to 14 years to pay off, and you hand the bank almost as much in interest as the balance itself. 14 years. And you understand for the first time that the debt isn't a background detail. It's a second rent you agreed to without ever signing anything. Your friend doesn't lecture you. She just says, quietly, I did the same thing with a suitcase and a bracelet I bought myself for my 30th. Took me 2 years to climb out. She's not showing off with the details. She's being exact the way you'd describe the shape of a scar. You'd always assume she just had money figured out. What surprises you isn't the debt. It's how much of your 6 figures is already spoken for before you get to choose anything. You don't fix it that night. You just stop pretending you don't know the shape of it. And underneath the fear, a smaller, steadier feeling takes hold. If you built this without noticing, you could unbuild it the same way on purpose this time. Starting with the first pillar, the stability cushion. A few weeks later, a coworker comes in limping, showing everyone a photo of his truck on a tow truck. Transmission $4,200. He'd financed the truck, still owes more than it's worth. And now he's putting the repair on the same card already carrying his ski trip from January. You watch him laugh about it in the break room, the kind of laugh that's really just panic, wearing a better outfit. And you think about your own $6,400 and how close you are to being exactly him. But someone else tells you the other version of that story. A coworker from accounting. Over coffee. Her car got rear-ended in the spring 9,000 in damage. Not her fault, but the other driver's insurance took 6 weeks to pay out. She didn't flinch. She had money set aside, earning interest, for exactly that kind of morning. She paid the shop directly and waited for the reimbursement without missing a bill. It's not that I'm rich, she tells you. I just decided at some point not to be one bad week away from a crisis. That night, you do something you've never actually done. You write out your real monthly baseline, not your lifestyle, just survival. Rent, utilities, groceries, insurance, the minimum on your debt. You leave off the car lease on purpose. Because a car you can't really afford isn't a baseline, it's a decision you're still paying for. The number comes out to around $3,300 a month. You multiply it by 5, and you land on roughly 17,000 5 months of floor beneath you, in case the floor ever disappears. You don't have that. You have $300 in a big bank savings account that paid you 9 cents in interest last year. You actually check, because her comment stung a little. Then, right there on the couch, you open a high-yield savings account, paying around 40 times what your old bank was giving you on the same dollar. You move $200 in that night. It's not the 17,000. It's not close. But it's the first time in longer than you can remember that money moved in a direction you chose, instead of a direction that happened to you. This isn't about giving up everything. It's about building something underneath yourself before you reach for anything else, so the next tow truck, yours or anyone's, doesn't get to decide what happens to you next. Once that floor exists, a different question pulls at you, the second pillar, automated growth. Open enrollment lands in your inbox, and this year, instead of skimming past it, you actually click through. There's a box asking how much of your paycheck to route into your retirement account, and next to it, in small gray text, a line about your employer matching up to a few percent. You'd seen that line every year. This is the first year you understand what it means. Free money, the moment you ask for it. And every year before this, you didn't ask. You bring it up at a family cookout, mostly because a retired uncle is there a man who drives a 10-year-old sedan, lives in the same modest house he bought decades ago, and somehow quietly paid for the whole family's dinner before anyone noticed. You ask him, half joking, how a regular salary turns into that. He tells you he opened a retirement account in his 20s and never touched it. Just let it sit and grow while he lived an ordinary life. Later, a cousin admits he only started investing 2 years ago, and he's putting in double what the uncle ever did. Trying to close the gap, and the math doesn't care how hard he tries. The uncle's early dollars had 30 extra years to compound. You realize, standing there with a paper plate, that the version of you sitting on $300 wasn't just missing money. You were missing years. That week, you open a retirement account and set up an automatic transfer every month. You bump your workplace contribution up to the full match, because the uncle's voice is still in your head calling it money you're allowed to have and simply never asked for. And inside, you don't pick flashy individual stocks. You build the same boring setup he described, a broad total market fund, some international, a little in bonds as a shock absorber. Historically, the market has averaged strong long-term returns, never a guarantee, but the reason his untouched dollars became a paid-off car and a dinner tab nobody saw coming. You set the transfers to happen automatically, the same day your paycheck lands, before you can decide to spend it on something else. Nothing lights up on the screen. And for once, the money moving without your permission is the whole point. But automating growth does nothing about the other side of your paycheck, the third pillar, capping lifestyle creep. A friend gets engaged, and the group chat fills with rooftop photos, string lights, a cocktail in her hand, and on her wrist, a luxury watch catching the light in every shot. She got it for herself to celebrate. What she doesn't post, what you only learn because she mentions it privately, is that it's on a payment plan, alongside a bag she's still paying off. You used to be her. 10 months ago, you were this exact story. You don't judge her. You just recognize it, the way you'd recognize your own handwriting on someone else's page. You go home and open your statement not looking for a crisis this time, just looking. 4 streaming subscriptions, 1 you haven't opened since winter, a premium gym membership you've used twice all year, food delivery 11 times in the last month, averaging $30+ a delivery. None of it felt like a decision when it happened. Each one was just a tap, a small yes that never got revisited. You don't cancel everything at once. You know that kind of restriction snaps back harder. Instead, you give yourself one rule. Anything over $75 that isn't already budgeted has to wait 7 days. You test it 2 weeks later, in front of a pair of designer sneakers everyone at the office seems to wear. You want them the way you wanted the watch. You put your card away and set a reminder. 7 days later, you don't want them anymore. The pull just quietly left, the way it always does once the moment that created it has passed. You buy a $60 pair you'll actually wear to work every day, and you feel something closer to relief than deprivation. You keep your essentials sitting around 60% of your take, home, the range that separates people who look rich from people who quietly become it. You cancel the subscriptions you don't use. You drop the fancy gym for a cheaper one you actually go to, because the marble lobby was never the thing keeping you fit. None of this makes you interesting at a party. Nobody photographs a canceled subscription. And cutting it doesn't feel like missing out. It feels like you finally have money left over that's allowed to be spent on something that isn't an apology to yourself. Which brings the last pillar, guilt-free joy. Your phone buzzes on a Tuesday, the automated transfer notification, money moving into your retirement account, same as every payday. This time you stop and look at the running total. It's crossed a real number since you started. Nobody texts you congratulations for it. There's no rooftop, no photo, just a number quietly getting bigger while you make coffee. And somehow that's become one of your favorite moments of the week. A friend calls with an idea, a long weekend away for a wedding, flights a few $100s. A year ago, you'd have either said no out of guilt or said yes and put the whole thing on the card without checking. This time, you open your budget. You've been setting aside a small slice of every paycheck into a separate account you don't touch for anything except this. You even labeled it joy, which felt embarrassing to type the first time and doesn't anymore. There's enough in it for the trip, the gift, and a dinner out with room left over. You say yes without the familiar flutter of dread, not because the trip stopped costing money, but because for the first time, the money already existed before the yes did. At the wedding, you put on that same watch, the one that sat on your dresser 10 months ago, next to the mail you couldn't open. You never sold it. You just stopped needing it to prove anything. It's paid off now. Same watch, different person wearing it. A friend asks if you finally treated yourself to something new. You tell her, no, it's the same one. It's just actually mine now. Not a monthly balance pretending to be mine. She goes quiet for a second. The way you did that night with the calculator open, like she's doing the same math about her own wrist. You don't lecture her. You don't lecture anyone anymore. The version of you a year ago wouldn't have listened to a lecture either. You needed the declined card and the 14-year math to actually feel it before anything changed. Nobody talks you out of the trap. You just eventually notice you're standing in it. You still make the same income you made a year ago. Nothing about the paycheck changed. What changed is what happens to it in the space between landing in your account and disappearing. That gap, the one you never used to look at, is where the entire difference was living the whole time. Tomorrow, the rent still comes out. The debt still stings a little. You'll still see something shiny you don't need. None of it fixes itself now. You just get to choose, every single payday, What happens in that small gap between the number landing and the number disappearing? That gap is yours now. What you build inside it next is still an open question.